On behalf of the Global Home Education Exchange Council, I'd like to welcome everyone to today's session on funding. My name is Peter Stock. I'm the president of Hslda, the Homeschool Legal Defense Association in Canada. I'll be moderating our discussion today, and I'm also serving with the Global Home Education Exchange Council as the chair of the Outreach Committee. So this webinar series is a project of Ghex. It's a joint project between our advocacy and outreach committees. And so I'm working with Mike Donnelly, who chairs our advocacy committee, and together we're moderating the various sessions in the series. Our goal here is to help you as a leader in your country to create a robust support structure for homeschoolers in your country. Ghex is supported by many organizations and individuals right around the world, and we want to thank everyone who's part of our network and who supports our work to advance the freedom of home education. We believe that everyone everywhere should have easy access to home education without undue burdens from the government. As the UN Declaration on Human Rights states in Article 26.3, parents have a prior right to decide what kind of education their children will receive. And we believe that home education is a natural, fundamental, and inalienable human right. To support the global home educating community, Ghex works to connect leaders, support research, and influence policy in nations right around the world. So if you want to know more about Ghex, see our website, ghex.world, ghex.world for more information. So home education is growing everywhere, and we want to hear about how to fund it. Now, most of our organizations rely on volunteers, at least in the initial stages, to get going, and probably through much of our history as well. But at a certain point, we all tend to find that money becomes a necessity, whether it's to pay for a lawyer who's defending one of our families in a court case, or maybe the cost of transportation to the legislature. At a certain point, we do find we need some money. So I'm going to give the briefest of introductions to our panelists today, because really we want to hear them tell their own stories. So we'd like to hear from each of them about their involvement in either the founding or growing of the organization they are involved with, what they discovered along the way, and also perhaps what they'd do differently if they had to do it all over again. So today I have four panelists with me from countries right around the world. And I'm going to start with Jim Mason, who is a vice president of Homeschool Legal Defense Association in the United States. Jim leads a team of litigators there, and he's been with the organization a long time. So if I can turn it over to Jim. Jim, please tell us your story. Thank you.
Well, thanks very much. Yes, so I'm the vice president. I was hired here 20 years ago to direct our litigation efforts, and over the years, various other aspects of what we do have come under my watchful eye, I guess you'd say. And one of those in recent years has been our fundraising efforts. So let me just give you a quick history of Hslda. Started in 1983 as a membership organization. We were 100% funded by member dues, and pretty much our entire mission was legal protection and legislative lobbying. And that's about all we did. And we started very small with one full-time employee back in 1983. And that sort of marks the beginning of the homeschool movement in America, really just kind of started getting going then. And I imagine that many of the folks on this webinar, it's probably similar to where you may be in your country today. And you know, the vision that Hslda's founders had was that by kind of homeschoolers banding together through a membership dues organization, you might not be having an issue in Iowa, but there may be a pretty big issue in North Carolina. And so by banding together, we could send resources, legal protection resources, legislative lobbying to where it was most needed. As homeschooling grew those first early years were a little shaky, but then suddenly homeschooling started really taking off, and our membership dues pretty much completely financed our organization over the next couple of decades, including with enough funding to be a significant founder of Patrick Henry College, where my offices are. Then some of you may recall back in 2008, 2009, the economy started having a bit of a crash, and suddenly membership dues were not covering all of what we wanted to do. And, you know, our mission had grown somewhat past legal protection, and we were getting more into helping homeschoolers in practical ways through we have a number of educational consultants that our folks can call and get help with their special needs kids or preparing their kids for college, that sort of thing. And so in addition to our membership dues, we began raising money, and we called it the Homeschool Freedom Fund. And it was kind of organized around our litigation efforts, the cases we were doing. And the way we started, so this is, I don't know that I would necessarily recommend this, but because we had such a long history of only membership dues and we were not a donation-based organization, there was a feeling that, if you depend on donations, those can go up and down. Membership dues stayed pretty steady. So we had a little bit of a cultural, aversion to getting into the donation world. But we had a lot of followers, we had a lot of members, and I suggested that, hey, some of these people would be willing and actually cheerfully eager to support our mission beyond their annual membership dues. And so we dipped our toes in the water and put a donate button on our webpage. And that was the first thing we did. And without any marketing at all, without really any effort on our part, donations started coming in. And so that kind of affirmed for us that, the homeschool movement really supports our efforts, and growing the homeschool movement resonated with people. So over the years, we became more formal and more purposeful in our fundraising efforts, apart from our membership dues. And a parallel track, about 15 years ago, a donor came to us and said, I want to help widows continue to be able to homeschool. And we didn't really have a way to do much with that. So we created a second organization that we called the Homeschool Foundation. And we took in that first donation to help widows. And kind of as a little bit of a part-time gig, actually, we started raising money separately for that charitable purpose of helping homeschoolers who needed a little extra funding. And so these two parallel tracks were happening at the same time, and each of them was growing with really kind of only part-time work on them. And then about 5 years ago, all of that fundraising was placed under my supervision, and we merged the two organizations. And so now HSLDA takes donations for the cause and donations for the charitable purpose of helping homeschoolers in need. And I have to tell you, I mean, it's just been amazing. We like to think of it as, HSLDA has kind of the justice side and the mercy side, the compassionate side. And those two messages really resonate well with our audience. So what I've learned in the 5 years that I've been kind of overseeing all of this is that people really support the homeschool movement in a real visceral way. It's a cause that people get behind, whether it's helping in the legal arena or helping families who need help. And the best things that we do is just tell the true stories of what's happening out there. And, our storytelling, I believe, has improved enormously over the last few years as we become more purposeful. We started collecting stories. So little things that that you may not even, people send you an email, and, oh, thank you for this and this. And you don't think much about it, but behind that, there's a really good story. And so we started collecting the stories and developing the stories and sending the stories out to our folks. And that's what really attracts, you can almost tell when there's a really good story that we put out through an email, we'll get, a really terrific response. And right now in the country, in our country anyway, education is hot. Parental rights are hot. I mean, it's on the front pages. It's in the news all the time. And so part of what we're doing is trying to expand what we do to meet this moment. Because of the pandemic, hundreds of thousands of new families are not just joining homeschooling, but they're deciding to stick with it. And that's been our mission, is to help people make the transition because of COVID, and then help them really experience the joy of homeschooling. So we've started, doing a lot of outreach kind of communications to those people, and our traditional supporters. That's really resonated with them, that they could be helping this whole new generation of, this tremendous growth in the homeschooling movement. And as we tell the stories of people who have made that transition, the traditional homeschoolers are really responding well to that. There's kind of three, let me just close with this. There are three things that we try to do in our general communications and in our specific communications as well. And that is for people to act. What you want is people to know what you're doing, and you want them to act. You want them to side with your mission and write you a check. And so what we have to communicate for people to be willing to act is there's a dissatisfaction with the current state of affairs. So here in America, watching your student parents watching their kids do Zoom classes, or sending their kids to school where they have to wear masks all day, they're dissatisfied with the current state of affairs. You have to offer them a vision of a better state. This is where you are now. Here's where you could be. The joy of homeschooling, the joy of seeing your kids learn in your own home, the joy of raising, intelligent, creative, interested students. And then you have to show them that there is a way to get there. We have to believe there's a way to get there. So all of our communications, we try to communicate these three things: dissatisfaction with the current state of affairs, a vision of a better state, and a belief that you can get there. And that resonates with our donors because they see that they're helping this new thing. I mean, I feel like this time in our history could be, a new birth of freedom through the homeschool movement. Thanks.
Thank you, Jim. And I should have mentioned Jim is in Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C. So let me turn now to Cape Town, South Africa, and we'll hear from Boa van der Ems, who is the chairman of the Pastelozi Trust. Welcome, Boa.
Thank you very much, Peter. Yes, I'm currently the chairperson of the Pastelozi Trust, but I started off in 2002 when as the treasurer. So I've been involved with the finances for a long time. So the Pastelozi Trust is the legal defense fund for home education in South Africa. We were founded in 1998 by Leendert van Oostrum and his wife, Karen van Oostrum. She is currently the CEO of the organization, and Leendert passed away in 2018. Oh no, 2016, sorry. And since then, I've taken over as the chairperson of the trust. So the trust is also a membership organization. The mission of the trust is to promote the cause for freedom in education. Now, if you want to promote a cause, you must ask for donations, for people that support your cause to give donations. But if you've got an organization that needs to pay salaries of people that are employed either part-time or full-time, they need to be regular donations. So there are many civil organizations in South Africa that promote causes and ask people to give them regular donations that can pay the salaries of the employees of the organization. But for such an organization to be feasible, you need a real bad government that constantly comes out with bad new legislation that can constantly motivate the people to donate and remain part of the organization. Although we've got a government that's indeed bad and that constantly issues bad legislation, the education legislation is very slow. So there's been a legislative change in the SA Schools Act in 1996, and they are currently busy with amendments to those laws. So unfortunately, that's not good enough to keep the people motivated to donate on a regular basis. So therefore, regular donations to promote the cause of the collective is not going to work for funding the organization. Therefore, we are a membership organization that gives a benefit to the individual member. So when you join the Pastelozi Trust, the individual member gets some benefits, and those benefits are that we will manage conflicts between home educators and government. We will provide advice when it comes to home education and engagement with government, and we will keep them updated. And that value proposition gives the members peace of mind. So we are giving individual members a service that gives them peace of mind. And for that, home educators are willing to join the Pastelozi Trust and pay a membership fee that keeps the organization going. So therefore, our main source of income is the membership fees that gives the individual benefit of giving parents a safe space in which they can home educate their children. And then that also generates the funds that we use to promote the cause, the greater cause for the collective, namely freedom in education. So that is how we've been operating, and it's been exhilarating since 2016 when the government started considering new legislation, and it's creating a good positive feedback loop. We're giving people a safe space in which to home educate. That causes the movement to grow. That raises concerns of government, that causes more conflict, and therefore the need for the trust becomes increasingly visible for the public, and the trust is able to grow. I think that is what I've got to say about funding. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bua. So I'm going to move now to East Asia, and we'll hear from Edric Mendoza, who runs Homeschool Global from Manila in the Philippines. Welcome, Edric.
Thanks, Peter. Yeah, I was saying I wanted to answer the question directly, which is, what are the top 3 lessons we have had as far as funding is concerned in our part of the world as we advance homeschooling. And the way that we've seen it, we're a fairly young movement in the world. Of course, the pandemic has changed things, but what we have tried to do in our space is we looked at the individual needs of families and then the collective needs of the movement with regards to government and leadership. So there have been 2 organizations I've been part of. One is the one Peter mentioned, which is privately owned and run. It is called Homeschool Global, and that is the organization that supports individual families' needs and helps push homeschooling in that direction. Whereas another organization, our national organization, is called HAPPY, Homeschool Association of the Philippines. That is a leaders organization that now interfaces with our local government, or national government rather. Our Department of Education helps create frameworks and really equips leaders so that as these leaders serve individual families, then they are better equipped in doing that. So those two organizations have had funding needs, and what I wanted to share would be lessons from those through the 10, 12, 13 years or so that we have been involved in these things. So for Happy and HG for short, three things. The first is we realized early on that our focus should really be not funding, but value. So don't focus on funding, but focus on value. What do I mean? When we were trying to kickstart things in either organization, the need to fund it was obviously present. But instead of focusing on where do we source this, how do we source this, we wanted to ask ourselves, what value do we want to bring to the people who will be we will be serving? So if it's families, what can we offer to the families? If it's the leaders and working with the government, then what value can we give there? And as to give practical things that we were able to discover, we saw a slew of products and services for families, such as accreditation services, graduation, book resources, homeschool help, consultations. So all of those in family services became our focus. And as we built those products and services and gave value, then we were able to secure funding and resources to keep that organization growing and really keep it healthy. And on the other side, for the national organization, we asked ourselves, what value can we bring that not an individual organization could not bring? So we, very much like what we heard from our two other panelists earlier, we banded together leaders. Back then, there were maybe only 7 or 8, but now it has exploded, as you can imagine, with the pandemic. And with those different leaders, we said, what collective value can we give to each other as leaders and to the movement as a whole? So we started creating national conferences, and that became a funding source. And even as individual leader members, because we had private organizations or groups behind us, then we were able to use that membership fee, if you will, to also move us forward. So that was one major learning. Don't focus on the funding. Of course, that's important, but focus more on the value, because when the value is clear and you're able to present it to the people you want to serve, then the funding or the money that is necessary to obtain that value becomes a byproduct, if you will. That's our learning. The second thing that we learned is don't source funding or donations, instead cast the vision. So what do I mean by that? There was a point where even at the start, we needed some seed money to get things going, right? I mean, you can't just go purely on value without any starting money. So the starting money we needed or used in both organizations were sourced by not so much asking for the money we need and justifying that. Instead, we cast a vision. And I love what Jim was saying earlier. Actually, I was taking notes. I took notes from both gentlemen. In their case, he was talking about dissatisfaction with the current state, vision of a better future, and a belief that you can get there. For us, we also use a similar approach where when we talked to some initial investors for the Homeschool Global, we talked about the vision of changing this country with a new way of learning that's family values based. And because this was a Christian company as well, then we used that and talked about how we wanted to infuse Christian values. So that vision really helped compel them to initially invest, and that helped get us started. On the other front, the vision we cast, the difference in the national organization was because of the vision that we gave to the leaders about how we could be part of history, a crop of dads and moms, even educators who would help shape homeschooling and this new form of learning in the Philippines that would infuse values and raise up a different breed of young people. That drew them to be part of the organization and actually do it as volunteers. So for many years, the core group of people working and running and mounting these events were volunteers. And I think the upside is because the core group were all leaders in various organizations. As far as compensation and funding needs for the individuals, it was taken care of by those private organizations that they were representing or the groups that they were representing. So that was a second learning for us as far as funding. If the first is don't focus on funding, focus on value. The second is don't seek to source the funding so much as casting a vision. So when you have the opportunity to speak to people, don't focus so much on what amount you need and kind of justifying that. Instead, give them a vision of what your organization is all about. And then what we find amazing is you get people who will now not just fund, but can become stakeholders and contributors in various sorts, not just money. The third lesson that we've had, and up to this day, this is part of the journey that I'm going through, is I like to call faith sourcing. So what is faith sourcing? As far as funding is concerned, the last tip or the last learning we've had is really, I did mention that this one organization is a Christian organization. That is also my faith background. The other one is a national organization. So it's a mix, right, of various religious background. It's not a religious organization. But across both, what I've learned personally and what I've learned with a number of the key leaders is faith sourcing. What does that mean? There's nothing like good old school praying and bringing the organization and its needs to God's. And we began to start seeing him work, in ways that just have continued to blow us away. So those would be three top lessons so far that we have learned. Again, we are a young organization or a young movement, if you will, but we have seen it grow to the tens of thousands now across the country, and with Filipino families, even in various parts of the world, learning and embracing and experiencing the benefits. So to recap, don't focus on funding, focus on value. Second, don't source or seek to source funding so much as cast a vision. And then third, faith source. Those have been powerful lessons for us in our movement here so far.
Thank you so much, Edric. All right, let's move back across the Pacific to the United States again. And I'm going to go to Stephen Craig. Stephen is the leader of an organization known as CHEC, and I'll let him explain that. Now, this is the only organization represented here that is not a national organization. It's a state organization. And of course, there are many countries in the world where education is governed at the state or provincial level, the United States being one of them, Canada here being another. And even if your nation is governed at the national level with regards to education, if that's where the law is decided on education, you may still want a regional organization in your area to be founded, an organization that can represent regional interests or minister to local groups on a regional basis. So we felt it was really important to hear from somebody who founded and has been involved in a regional organization. So that's the reason for inviting Stephen here today. And so we want to hear about his journey. Stephen, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Delight to be here with you today. I have been involved with homeschooling a long time. I was homeschooled as a young person all the way up to college. And so it's definitely a passion of mine. And now as a homeschool dad of 6, really thankful for what homeschooling has meant to me personally and to my family, and just the opportunities and freedoms we have to continue to do this amazing thing we call homeschooling. I've been the executive director for Christian Home Educators of Colorado, CHEC, for 7 years. And prior to that, I was involved with volunteer work with another similar organization up in Washington State that my family helped to found up there. So I've been kind of involved in homeschool organization at the state level for probably 15 to 20 years. So on both the volunteer and staff side. And certainly funding is huge. As you look around in the United States, many states like Colorado have a similar state association. They're very important, especially for many things, but for keeping watch along with Hslda on legal issues at the state level, kind of as boots on the ground and collaborating with Hslda in many ways. So we're grateful for the opportunity to do that. But state organizations have very much tended to struggle with funding. And I think just a little bit of background, many of the states, the primary way that they get funded is through an annual conference that they do for homeschoolers. About 10 to 15 years ago, our organization really felt a need to shift away from that model and to really diversify our funding, and to have that be our event income be part of our funding, but not such a substantial part of it. And so we for many years have moved in the direction of fundraising through donations. We are not a membership organization, so our funding comes through events and products we produce, through fundraising, which is significant, and through an umbrella school that we have, which in some ways is similar, I guess, to having membership. We do provide a service as an umbrella school. And so people belong to us, not as a member, but as a family that's enrolled in our umbrella program. So I think the things the three things I'd pass on this morning, so many good things have already been said here, and appreciate everything that's been said. I think funding, especially from a fundraising perspective, which I think is really critical for any organization to head in the direction of, is that it's got to start with a strong and compelling vision. And we have a strong and compelling vision. This is about kids. This is about freedom. This is about, for us as a Christian organization, this is about eternity. And so we have an extremely compelling vision, as Jim talked about. People are willing to give to this, and we have it. Sometimes we're not very good at spelling that out and really sharing what that vision is and why it's compelling. So I think really defining your why as your organization and the big picture of what you're doing. Why should somebody give you $1 million? Why? What are you trying to accomplish? So that's number one. Number two, I would say, is you got to be willing to step out in faith, to take risks. We've had to do that a number of times. If you're an organization that doesn't have a lot of money, that can be scary. But God does reward faith, and you gotta be willing to seize the moment and not just think, well, we can't do this because we don't have the money. A lot of times the money comes to those that are doing things and those that are willing to take some calculated risks. And so that would be lesson number two. Number three, you gotta spend money to make money, and that can be hard if you don't have money to start with. Obviously, you got to start somewhere, but making the calculated investments, kind of building off of point number two, invest in the things that are really going to kind of pay off for your organization, that are going to help build brand awareness. They're going to help you do things, and be willing to invest in those things, and to go out and talk to people about, here's what we could do if we had this money. You have a plan. It sort of starts with a plan, a vision, what you're about, and what could be possible, as has already been shared. So a couple things I think would have helped me in my role in just doing better over the years. I've got lots of room for improvement. I think for all of us, we all have our areas where we're weak, where we need to grow in. Faithfulness over the long haul, I think, will pay off for all of us. But a couple of things for me, just the ability, as I kind of talked about in the lessons learned, is the ability to communicate and share that compelling vision with people, and with donors in particular, is an area of growth for me, I think, as well as the ability to network, to know how to network and to find particularly large donors. Looking at donations recently for our organization, I think about 80% of the donations come from the top 20 donors, just as I was looking at numbers for the last year. So you really kind of, we're grateful for everybody that contributes to our organization. And certainly we don't discount the smaller donations, but you kind of see where, in terms of the lower hanging fruit and the time that it takes to build a donation base, targeting purposefully and pitching to those larger donors again, we have a really compelling vision. And I think people care about kids, people care about freedom, people care about the direction of their country and what happens when kids are set in a bad trajectory. And so this is something that does tell a good story, but we have to do the work of finding those stories, as Jim talked about, and get them out there. So a couple practical things to wrap up for me. I would say, in addition to fundraising, we've produced products and specific resources that we charge, families for, creating the value, as was spoken of. And I think you really got to kind of look at your specific situation. You look for your unique opportunities in your country or state or province, and see how you can leverage those unique opportunities and create resources around those. So we've had a number of those specific to Colorado, that we've said, hey, this is a specific need here. Oftentimes it is something that's required in the law, and it could be something as simple as in our law for non-public schools, so private school homeschoolers that want to homeschool under a private school, there's a requirement that students be taught flag etiquette. So we created a little 8-page flag etiquette booklet, and we sell that. And it's a really small thing, but over the years, it's produced a fair amount of income just from that one small little resource, because there was one little requirement in the law to teach flag etiquette. So we produced a resource that helps families do that. So look for those unique opportunities. That's a small one. There's been big ones as well. And I think we all have them. And so we just need to look for those opportunities for ways that we can create value to the specific needs in our regions. Number two, I would say, invest in good people on your team and in your organization. I think that's just a real bottleneck, just across state organizations, is just having enough people to get out there and do things. And often, you have to start with volunteers. But you can, even if you're starting with volunteers, there's lots of ways you can say thank you. You can create value outside of a paycheck, but certainly I think a goal is to try to get paid staff that can bring a certain amount of just increased regularity of operations and excellence to your organization. So again, as one of those ways to kind of step out and take risks that will really help your organization, I would say invest in good people. And then, although we're a nonprofit, we try to run our nonprofit like a business. And one of the applications of that, I think, is when you're running a business, you're realizing that there's competition. You're realizing that you need to perform at an excellent level. You're realizing that branding matters, professional branding matters. And I think these are just realities in our day. People are going to hit your website. If it doesn't look good, if it doesn't look very informative, if they don't hear back from people, it's going to be hard to develop buy-in there. So run it like a business. And so invest in the branding, in the infrastructure that will elevate your perception. And I think as that happens, that will be more attractive to the larger donors as they see, okay, this is an organization that seems to have together, they're doing things, and we can get behind this. So those are three practical things in closing. So thanks again for the time to be with you guys today.
Thank you, Stephen. That's great. All right, we're going to move to questions now, and we have an audience. I see we have people from all over, including Europe and Africa. So I'm going to encourage those of you who are in our audience to pose questions. You can put them in the chat or in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. There's an opportunity to do that. And while some of you are constructing some questions there for us, I'm gonna pose one to our panelists just to keep things moving along here. And it's this. We know that homeschoolers are a thrifty bunch. In fact, most homeschooling families, there's usually just one income in the family, or maybe one and a bit. And so homeschooling families tend to be fairly thrifty. Yeah, that's been my experience anyway. They know the value of a dollar for sure, and they're careful about how they spend their money. So that can create a bit of a challenge when it comes to things like membership fees, for example. So I'm going to ask each of you, how do you set your membership fees, given the maybe the income in your region or your nation, given the incomes of homeschool families? How do you get to the point where you decide this is what we should charge? Maybe I'll start. Can I start in South Africa with Bua, and we'll move around the table, please.
Yeah, I can't remember how the original membership was determined. Currently, our membership fee, I think, is affordable. It is the equivalent of a very low-end mobile phone contract per month, which I think is affordable for rich and poor, because South Africa is a poor country, and but even the poorest of the poorest, they've got mobile phones. Even the beggar on the street has got a mobile phone. So I think that is our that's how we look at our membership fee, and we think it's affordable. The other thing we do is our membership fee is inflation free. So you join at a certain fee, and you stay on that fee for the rest of your period when you're a member. So in South Africa, you've got compulsory school attendance from the age of 7 to 15. So when your youngest child is older than 15, then people usually the membership cancel their membership. So you stay on that membership fee, so it makes budgeting easier. The other thing is we also allow for what we call associate members. So even if you don't have children of compulsory school age, you can continue to be an associate member, pay your membership fees, but you obviously don't need the benefits anymore.
Excellent, thank you, Boa. Jim, can I get your feedback on that question, please? Jim Mason from Hslda in the US.
Yes, so for many years, we kept our membership dues the same. I think probably for the first 20 to 25 years. And we only raised them slightly even then. And so that's a big part of our fundraising efforts, actually, is to keep our membership dues low and affordable for others. And part of we actually have a one of our kind of buckets that we put money into is for people to give so that we can scholarship people into membership. And so it's been an ambition of ours to keep the membership dues as low as possible for as long as possible. Can I just remark about your thrifty comment? Back in the day when I was encouraging us to think that maybe homeschoolers would actually donate above and beyond, that was the kind of the big objection I heard. Oh, homeschoolers are too thrifty, they're all on one income. I think that's true, but I also will tell you this, homeschoolers are very generous. And once we sort of made it possible for families to donate and really give them the vision for why they should, there's a lot of, at least in America, there are a lot of folks who own their own businesses and who are entrepreneurial and who just have a vision and a heart of generosity beyond what, I mean, I daily I marvel at the generosity of our donors. So thrifty, yes, but generous also.
Thank you, Jim. Good point. All right. Edric in the Philippines, tell us about membership rates and how you decide to set them, please.
Thanks, Peter. So as I was explaining earlier, the two organizations, right, the national organization and then the privately run corporation or company that serves families. This one is pretty straightforward because they're products and services. It's like any other company, you know, that's how it funds itself. People buy and you're able to get funding as a result of those products and services that you sell and offer. For the national organization, something maybe different that we did is we tried to keep our costs very low. So the structure, as I was saying earlier, are leaders. So these leaders as we get together, the services we give each other is basically best practices, what's working for you. And when there's an issue with one, for example, they experienced some prejudice as one of the students assimilated back into a regular school system and wanted to go off to college, then we band together. And as a national organization, we go to the government and say, what's going on? And we try to navigate that. So the costs we have are as needed. And when we mount events such as a national conference, the funds that are used to be able to cover those costs would be the fees from the participants who attend the event or sponsors of the event. So again, a fairly unique, different model where we don't try to carry any costs as much as possible. So there is no need to actually find a steady stream of income there. That seems to have worked so far.
Excellent, thank you. And can I turn to Stephen? You may not have membership fees, I'm not sure, but and you did talk about your funding model, but do you have something to share on this particular question?
Yeah, so although we're not a membership organization, we do have an umbrella school, and that is, people will say, hey, well, I'm a member of Czech, and what they mean is that they are enrolled in our umbrella school. And so I think that's kind of our, I'll speak to that as kind of our version of membership, because in some ways I think it is membership. We're people are, sort of attached to us through an agreement that we have, and we're providing value for that. I think providing value is what's really key, and looking for ways to build value into that membership, as well as just, telling people how, this is kind of another angle on fundraising. By being a member, you are supporting this cause, and this is what you are doing. So I think membership can also just be, like I said, another take on fundraising. One of the things that was interesting for us is, we had kept our enrollment membership fees pretty stable over a long period of time. And then we had a particular situation here in Colorado where we were motivated to, in addition to just having kind of our umbrella school services as part of that arrangement, to include to bundle in many of our other products and services, or I should say events in particular. So our annual conference that I spoke about, and other training events like that. And so what we did is we felt like we had a need to increase our membership enrollment fee by about 70%. And we said, well, what if we kind of look around at all the things that we're doing, and we kind of say, hey, for this package of that's now 70% more, you get it all. What would that do for us? And we put together a bunch of different models and kind of looked at all the options, and essentially we went to this bundled approach and raised our prices and kind of waited to see what was going to happen. And people didn't even blink, really. We had one or two phone calls that were like, they weren't happy about it. But I think bundling in things that you do, helps to just create this value of, oh, I get all of this when I invest here. Worked out really well for us. And again, I think some of this just comes back to what is the value that you're presenting in your membership, and really working hard to make sure that that's clear.
Excellent. Thank you, Stephen. All right. We've spent a fair bit of time, I think most of us, talking about how our organizations operate and the funding model. I think for some folks who are seeing this for the first time, who are hearing about this for the first time, and maybe feel that some of the challenges and hurdles they may face are almost overwhelming, getting started may seem like a very daunting prospect. So I wonder if each of us could go back to something closer to the beginning and tell us a little bit more, not so much about how the organization started, but how the organization got started with its funding. Because as I said earlier, many of us get started with volunteers, and then at a certain point we realize we need money for this as well. Could we spend a little bit of time talking about what initially got us to the point of asking for money or charging a fee? whatever the case may be, and maybe what service it was you were offering for that fee, or what you specifically asked for when you were looking for money. Was there something that got you going? Is there a story you can tell there? I'm gonna go in the reverse order this time, maybe, and let's go back to Stephen in Colorado, and maybe do you have a story or two in that regard, Stephen?
Yeah, since I've been with the organization just for the last 7 years, obviously a lot of the stuff was put in place before me, and I just kind of carried it on. But I would say, I think one thing I would say is kind of back to your vision and your mission. I would say stay true to that as you're approaching the funding for your organization. We had a number of years ago, it's before my time, a sponsor come to our organization with what was for us a really big check at the time. I think it was $5,000 or something. And we determined that they didn't really align with our mission and vision to the degree that we wanted to promote them as a sponsor. And so we turned that down. And so I think it was a couple weeks later, we got a check in the mail from a grandmother of some homeschool kids somewhere for $5,000. And she just said, I appreciate what you do. I want to support that. And that was kind of a big, sort of faith builder for our organization. And so I would say, one thing I would say is just stay true to your vision and your mission as an organization as you approach this whole question.
Thank you, Stephen. All right, and as we're going through the next three panelists on this particular question, just encourage our audience to send in any questions they may have, and we'll pose them as well. All right, let's go to Edric next in the Philippines on this question.
Thanks, Peter. So my understanding of the question really is that what was the turning point where we figured there would be some funding needed at the very beginning, and how did we go about securing that, right? So exactly. I'll speak about the one national organization which I founded 2008, thereabouts. I basically looked at the landscape and asked myself, who are the other groups that are passionate about homeschooling and that are existing? And there were very few back at that time, about maybe 6 or 7. And I literally called each one of the heads, and we got together, and, we just got excited that they were like-minded folks, right? Hey, we all want to do this, even if we had different, maybe religious backgrounds and even cultural backgrounds. And then we decided to start going into making noise, creating a noise about, what homeschooling is. And to do that would take a conference. So we were going to mount the conference, and to the question now, that needed funding. So we had put together this group. We're now a national organization, a very fledgling one, and we wanted to mount the national conference, but it needed funding, right? And since it was a very new organization with no money, the creative option we did, or the creative solution, was to then look to the groups that these leaders were leading. And, there were a number of the groups that decided to bankroll or initially fund the conference so that some cash could get out. And then eventually the conference covered its own costs as, people paid for the fees. So that was one of the memories I have. And one of the things we did to get some money in is we tapped the groups of the leaders. And because there was a shared vision and this camaraderie amongst ourselves. We said that, even if technically we are competitors because we're all trying to serve homeschoolers in our own different ways, we're actually similar in that, we want to get the greater message out there. And so that spirit, if you will, allowed us to do that, is to tap the groups and say, okay, I'll bankroll first. And we were able to fund events like that eventually allowed our organization, if you will, to keep going.
Thanks, Edric. Jim, maybe you weren't around at exactly the time HSLDA itself was founded, but I know you were around when the Homeschool Foundation got going. So if you want to tell a story about either, we'd love to hear. We'd love to hear one or both.
So the origin story of HSLDA has probably been told a few times. I have it kind of memorized now. Two homeschooled dads back in the early 80s. Mike Ferris and Mike Smith, one up in Washington State, one down in California, both heard James Dobson on the radio interviewing Dr. Raymond Moore. He was talking about homeschooling. It resonated with each of them. They started homeschooling their own kids and discovered that, gosh, there's laws involved. And being lawyers, they started getting a lot of calls from a lot of other people who read about them and their homeschooling journeys. And they decided to start an organization that would protect the legal interests of homeschoolers all over the country. And they continued in their full-time gigs while they started the organization for a couple of years. I think it was 1983 is when we were started. 1985 or 6 is when things got to the point where they could hire the first full-time employee, and that was Chris Klicka. And then homeschooling really got going and legal battles really started firing off all over the country. People started joining in droves. Both Mike Ferris and Mike Smith came on full-time. And now we're up to over 100 employees, plus we have an online academy that has like 80 teachers. So altogether we have over 200 full and part-time employees in that since 1983. The Homeschool Foundation, as I mentioned earlier, was started when a donor had a heart for widows, came to us and said, hey, can you help widows? Here's 40 grand. And we said, well, sure, why not? So we started the Homeschool Foundation, and little by little, lots of people wanting to help widows. And then we expanded that to helping other homeschoolers in need, disaster victims and the like. And that's grown to where we raise over $1 million a year for that purpose.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jim. And Bua.
Yeah, I wasn't there from the beginning, and so I'm speaking under correction, but I think the story is very similar to the HSLDA. So our focus is very much legal defense. So we don't organize events and do all the other things that Edric and Stephen are involved with. Yeah, and I think there was some seed money that we received from the HSLDA to start off with. And then it was founded by Leendert van Oostrum, and he basically started the organization and did it up as a part-time thing. So for a long time, he worked at the university as a permanent employee, and then after hours, he did everything that needed to be done to serve the members. Fortunately, Leendert was a very special person that had a huge amount of knowledge about education and the law, and he could provide good advice. And there was not a lot of litigation for which we need funded. So we were able to slowly build up a capital fund from which we could fund litigation. So we don't have any staff attorneys. We make use of attorneys as and when needed, but we try to build up long-term relations with attorney firms so that they get the institutional knowledge. Yeah, that's what I can say.
Okay, thanks, Bua. And we have a question from an audience member here, and I think I would say that Jim Mason has probably already answered this on behalf of HSLDA, but I'll maybe pose it to our other panelists, and that's that every now and then organizations might receive requests for their membership fee to be donated, perhaps due to financial, well, certainly due to their own financial circumstances. So what do you do in your organization? Jim mentioned, of course, that there is a scholarship fund for those families that maybe have financial difficulties. What do we do in South Africa and in the Philippines and in Colorado? Maybe I'll go back to Bua to start answering that question. Thank you.
I think Karen knows the answer that the Pastelozi Trust does, so I don't think I need to answer her. But yes, we do on a case-by-case basis. If somebody wants to join the trust and they really can't afford it, on a case-by-case basis, we use donations from other people to fund their membership.
Okay, thanks, Bua. Edric in the Philippines.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward for us as well. Scholarships would be an option. or in that leader organization, if a leader's not able to provide the fees necessary, then the rest of the group will kind of pitch in, if not on an official capacity, then on a personal capacity.
Thank you. And Stephen in Colorado.
Yeah, so we just provide these scholarships as kind of has been said on a case-by-case basis. We do specifically target single homeschool moms and kind of just offer that scholarship to our various events and umbrellas program just across the board to them. So that is one specific group of people that we particularly try to offer those scholarships to. In terms of just the general need, it's normally, by request. And one thing we do ask families is we do try to usually go to them and kind of say, well, what could you do? And because we want to be giving, what we do to people that value what we provide. And it's not like we're trying to squeeze the last dollar out of families, but often when somebody contributes what they can do, it shows that they're leaning into the value of what you're providing to them. And that's important too. So we kind of try to ask them that question, well, what can you do? And then kind of tailor the scholarship to that.
Excellent. Thank you. Stay with me, Stephen, because I'll pose this next question, starting with you. The question is this. We kind of alluded to this at the beginning of the conversation. The question is, what would you do differently, knowing what you know now, as you look back over the past history of your organization?
I think we would have, been more intentional about fundraising from day one. Fundraising from a donor perspective from day one. So I think most state associations have kind of gotten it backwards in terms of providing events and services, and then coming kind of late to the party in terms of fundraising donation campaigns. And I think, that's just sometimes because of the nature of how the organization starts and the immediate perceived need that they're trying to meet. But I think more intentional focus on fundraising and donor development.
Thank you. And Edric, what would you have done differently over looking back over your past history?
What I did learn between those two organizations, it's definitely easy to work with teams and growing it and advancing homeschooling where people have proper fees or funding, right? So where we had a team, full-time staff in this company, things would move a lot faster and we get a lot more done versus the volunteer-based leader set. Apart from events, it was very hard to do a lot more because of that. So if I could do things over again, maybe at the national organization level, we would probably try and staff up more and see if, by being more aggressive in actually finding funding to be able to pay for full-time staff that could run things on a going basis. I think a lot more could have been done. That maybe looking back, that's what we would have done differently.
Thank you. All right, Bua.
Basically, very similar to Stephen. I think I think we would like also to put more effort into developing a donor base to enable people that want to support the collective objective to promote the freedom of education in society, to enable those people to support that cause.
Okay, thank you. And Jim at HSLDA.
So one of the things that we did, we started offering lifetime memberships 12 years or so ago. And that met with, tremendous success, really. And for an organization that's in need of funding, you get that immediate, the immediate hit of several years worth of membership dues that, you have a storehouse. But going back to the thrifty and generous question, when I first was starting to encourage us to raise money for the cause, not just membership, I had a kind of a notion that lifetime members, people who can write a check for a lifetime membership, are either super thrifty, right? They know they're going to homeschool and this is the cheapest way. They want to be a member for the whole time they're homeschooling, or they have resources, or both. So what we discovered is when we started asking lifetime members for donations, about a third of lifetime, I mean, I forget the numbers now, but a huge percentage of our large donors come out of our lifetime donor base. And so there are people who stroke that check for the lifetime membership for the cause, and they're down for, for life. I mean, really seriously for life and resources. And the other thing that we learned is when you make that value proposition that it's legal defense, that's a great value proposition, and that really brings in membership. But when you expand that to support the cause, something amazing happened to us. Many people who were members and then finished homeschooling obviously didn't have the value proposition of needing legal defense anymore. And so they stopped being members. But then we started asking them to stay on as donors. And that's been a big push for us that, here in America, we have generations. And so newly finished homeschooling parents stay on as donors for the cause.
All right. Thank you, Jim. That's really valuable. Okay, I've got a question here that comes from somebody in Hungary. The question is, how can you distinguish between low and moderate and high income families? Is it okay to ask them and to categorize the membership fees, or do you just set up a low fee and call for some donations as their income allows? Which one is practical and or encouraging, and which one's correct, as well as sufficient for growing your organization? So it's a interesting question to ask for sure. And maybe if I go back to starting the round with Jim, that would be great, please.
So we have our membership dues are basically uniform. We have 3 categories. One is a annual membership. One is a annual membership auto renew, which is slightly less expensive. And then we have a budget rate where you can join for a monthly. So you join for a year, but you pay monthly. And that's a way of kind of getting people in who might, wonder if what you're offering has any value to them. And we've discovered that they stick with us, not quite as well as the annual auto renew. And then, but basically our memberships are very similar in price. And what we've done, as I said before, is raise donations so that we can keep the membership dues as low as possible.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Bua in South Africa.
Yeah, as we've got a uniform membership fee, and we believe that our membership is always also affordable to the poorer families. And then obviously we make an exception on a case-by-case basis. So we don't distinguish between income groups.
Thank you, Bua. Edric, how do things work for your organizations?
Right. So as far as structuring fees are concerned, I think it's always helpful to start with the costs, right? So what are the costs you incur? So you can determine more or less what is the amount you need to be able to charge. And then if your concern is how do you now create fee structures to address different income brackets or different classes, then if you know what that cost is, you can flank it, right? You can create a higher price for those that can afford it, and then a lower one that can kind of be subsidized by those there, and maybe separate the value propositions also if that is the challenge you are facing, right? Or you can be upfront about it. You say, we have a single fee, and with that single fee, this is for everybody, but if it is a challenge for you, then you can come to us and we'll find a way to see if we can subsidize part of the fee for you. And in order to do that, then obviously you look at what your costs are, and then you create an additional factor so that you can absorb those people that you might need to subsidize because they can't afford the standard rate. So those are a couple of thoughts that we've kind of bounced around in either organization.
Okay, thank you, Edric. And Stephen in Colorado.
I think one of the ways that we've done this, we do just have one fee for our school. We would like to go in the direction to have multiple tiers, different levels of service, and I think that's allows people to kind of participate at the level that they're able to, or interested in. So I would say another way that you can kind of do this is, even if you don't have membership levels, is you can have add-ons, where, hey, we have this additional service or this product or this thing, so that, the people that have more money to spend and are looking for ways to spend that can. I also think, put the donation option right there, with your membership sign up and make the pitch. We try to make that pitch on all of our event, forms, registration forms, pretty much on everything we do. Even if it's a free event, we're saying, hey, we are a 501c3 organization. You can support us. And so that's just another way that you can give that soft ask. Even if you're, somebody's signing up for a lower, a lower priced thing, just continuing to get that message of, hey, here's what we're doing and here's why we need additional funds. And I think, that will begin to resonate with people that have more money to support you with.
All right, thank you, Stephen. And stay with me because I'll start with you next. So another question here from the United States. Do your nonprofits, do your organizations seek out funding via organizational grants? And I guess that's foundations and other, and maybe corporations and others that offer funding to nonprofits. If so, what's the criteria that a lot of these foundations or corporations look at when seeking, when making grants? And where do you look for such grants if you do look for them? Let's start with you, Stephen.
Sure.
Granting, is that something that?
Yeah. So I would say this is not an area that we're particularly strong on. We have gone after grants. We haven't had a lot of success with them. It's a lot of work, and it takes somebody good at grant writing. So we've done some of it. We've had some income from that, but not a tremendous amount of success. So I think if you're thinking of grants as, hey, this is a easy ticket way to kind of jumpstart the funding process, get a couple of big grants, maybe sounds like a lot less work than building a donor base. That hasn't worked for us, and so I think it could work for people maybe that were better at it than us. But I think I'd probably recommend more going after, as has kind of been mentioned, those people kind of in your circles that own businesses that have means, and really pitching with them that might be more successful than spending a ton of time writing grants. And in terms of lowest hanging fruit, I think grant writing is something to pursue, but in terms of lowest hanging fruit. So
super, thank you, Stephen. Edric, any experience or success with grants?
Not so much in the Philippine context. There aren't many of those accessible. So I think much similar to what Jim was saying. To what Stephen was saying is, if there are needs for funding outside of your usual donations, then you would look for corporations, maybe as sponsors, things of that nature.
All right, thank you. And Bua, how does that work in South Africa? Is the Pastelozi Trust being able to secure grants at all for any of its projects?
No, unfortunately, we haven't explored it, and we haven't had any success on it. And Stephen hasn't inspired me to explore it even further. So, but we'll think about it.
Okay. And Jim, has it worked at the national level for Hslda in the US?
Yeah, so our experience was similar to what Stephen was saying a few years ago. Before we merged our foundation into all-in-one organization, we actually contracted with a guy who said he could get us, he knew how to write grants, and it didn't really pan out for us. But in one of those things where you stop looking and the Lord provides, at the start of the pandemic, a couple of large educational choice foundations approached us. They approached us and they said, look, we think homeschooling, we want to fund groups that are doing innovative things to meet the moment of this pandemic where people are leaving the public schools. And so we have an ongoing relationship with them where they're giving us basically hundreds of thousands of dollars because they have the money and we know where the money's needed. And so homeschool organizations around the country are applying to us for grants and the criteria is, what are we doing in an innovative way to bring in these new people? We're basically just a pass through for that. Because we have the mechanism for grant review and write and we have the list of homeschool groups that we can send out to, and we have the mechanism for making grants. So they just give us the money and we pass it on through.
Excellent, thanks. Stay with me, Jim. So we'll kind of conclude with one last question, and we'll go around the circle. And it's simply this: do you have any final comments you'd like to make on funding? And also, could you share a word of encouragement for those who are thinking about starting a national organization, a regional organization in their country, somewhere around the world? Jim, could I start with you, please?
Yeah, I think that we are now living in one of the most exciting times for homeschooling, possibly in my lifetime. I mean, the beginning of the homeschooling movement was perhaps similar, but right now people are looking for alternatives all over the world. And, I just encourage anybody to really latch on to that. We're a Christian organization. We believe the Lord has put us here in America to help families discover homeschooling. And so we're putting a lot of resources and time and effort into helping those new people. I just really feel like, the Lord's behind this movement, and now's the time. So be bold, be brave, be courageous.
Thank you, Jim. All right, Bua in South Africa.
Yes, I can share Jim's excitement. We are in South Africa, we're also living in a very exciting time. The pandemic has shown that the school system is fragile and cannot take disruptions. And millions of children have lost millions of hours of education through those disruptions. And it's really opened up or create an openness to look broader for new innovative education solutions. And I'm very excited that from organizations, home education organizations can come up with innovative solutions, not only for the home education community, but for the broader society. And we are engaging with legislators, and they are starting to become open to listen to solutions and create a regulatory environment that can accommodate not only home education, but a diversity of what they call education modalities. That is a new buzzword in South Africa. Emerging education modalities, and it's very exciting to start the conversation and be part of that conversation of how we can create a new regulatory environment that can accommodate those modalities and serve the society as a whole.
Thank you, Bua. All right, Edric, can you share some last thoughts with us from the Philippines?
Sure, yeah. So on top of the tips that we gave earlier and many different bits of information from the amazing other panelists here, I would remind us and encourage us to go back to the why. Once again, why are you doing what you are doing? And as you look at why you are doing, ask another hard question. Is it distinctive? You and the organization is what you're doing and offering in this time when both gentlemen have already said it's very exciting. And once you see that, my final encouragement is go after it. I love this formula. I'm going to flash really quick. It's from a gentleman named Dave Ramsey in the US, a financial planner. Focused intensity over time multiplied by God equals unstoppable momentum. So that would be my final encouragement, is just go all out, pursue that relentlessly. Once that why is clear and you know why it's distinctive, go after it, and then you will see the funding and all these other things come together and the doors that are open to you. So that's been our story. That's been my personal story. And I hope that that's an encouragement to all of you who are watching this live or on demand.
Thank you so much, Edric. And Stephen, you get the last word today.
Wow. Well, what an amazing thing homeschooling has been. I mean, over the last 30, 40 years. Of course, homeschooling has been around since the beginning of time, but I think sort of in terms of the modern homeschool movement and what it's meant for the United States, what it's meaning for countries around the world, the opportunity to not just take school home, but to use that as a context for really shaping the values and at the eternal destinies of children. Something I'm profoundly grateful for. I think there's been a lot of blood, sweat, and tears by the founders of this movement, certainly by Hslda and leaders of organizations across the world. But I think the impact continues to be eternal. And I feel like God has prepared the movement for such a time as this, where we are seeing just a number of forces pressing against families in ways that have been somewhat unprecedented. And so I second what everyone has said as far as this being a very exciting time, a time when the fields are white to harvest. And this has been something that's been pressed upon our organization recently. This is time to go after it with all our heart. You know, when Jesus looked at the fields and said they're white unto harvest, he said, you know, pray that the Lord of the harvest would send forth laborers into his field. And you know, this is his harvest. I believe as a Christian organization, God is doing something unique in this time. We need to pray fervently for the resources for the people, and not be complacent about the opportunity. It'll be hard, yes, but it'll be eternally rewarding. I bear testimony to that.
All right, thank you. Thank you to all our panelists, Stephen, Jim, Edric, and Bua. And thank you to our audience. Thank you to those of you who tuned in. If you're watching this recorded at a later time, please know that there are a series of videos on different topics related to starting a national or regional organization, and we'd encourage you to view all of them and to get in contact with GHEX at ghex.world if you have more questions. Thank you so much.